Hello, very beautiful community. Let's have a little bit of fun without deceiving ourselves. So this is the wonderful Julia Ioffe writing a piece for Puck called Putin's Post-Iran Paranoia. And Julia is responsible, right? She's not Hamish de Breton Gordon, who writes things he's pulled out of his bum in the Telegraph. And Julia says, Vladimir Putin is, according to the chatter, completely spooked by the US-Israel war against Russia's old ally, particularly the reports that Israel targeted the Ayatollah by hacking traffic cameras in Tehran. Okay, chatter. Let's click on that, see what's behind the link. This is TV Rain and Michael Fishman. So he's not going to be able to say anything about what's going on in Putin's circle, because neither I, nor he, nor Julia have the access to know, so he's just presumably going to speculate. Let's see. The destruction of the harmony made a huge impression of Putin. How did they do it? What are their technical possibilities? What else can they do? Of course, Putin is measuring all of this up against himself. It's the first thing that comes to mind, and he's afraid. There's no more important subject in Russia than his personal security. That's why the Federal Protection Service is just acting in Putin's name and cutting off the internet. And then against were reports that his schedule of Kremlin meetings has been cleared. The cameras in Moscow are wired and don't depend on mobile internet. But they've still decided to turn it off, just to be on the safe side. It's easy to do that and actually figure things out. That's just a version of events, but it's believable. Putin needs a new level of security. Turned off internet in Moscow is actually the Putin bunker that everybody's joking about, post-Iran, post-Venezuela. There's a dose of truth in each joke, and the dose in this joke is 100%. The difference is that it's not a bunker that's being dug down, it's just a bunker that's being dug across the city of Moscow. All right, let's read Julia more. Earlier this month, the Russian president stopped going to the Kremlin. Let's click on stopped. This takes us through to against her. And what do they say? They give evidence about Putin's schedule, and then they say that there are recalcitrant but unverifiable rumors. I mean, okay. So Putin has stopped, according to unverifiable but persistent rumors, going to the Kremlin, and all his public events vanished from the calendar. Now Moscow virtually has no cell service, and it's become impossible to message, call, surf the web in large parts of the city. Even VPNs have been affected. One friend told me, Julia writes, that he needed to try 3 different services to see the videos I was sending him. The Kremlin has experimented with shutting off cell service in other smaller cities, but to do this in the nation's capital, a city of 13 million people, where so many of the country's businesses are headquartered, is shocking. And we talked about this yesterday, the day before, whenever was the last video, when I said that there is a kind of a colonial attitude that the population has to the authority that happens to be in control, own the territory in which they live. But there's a colonial attitude the other way around too, you know. As long as these people are not making a squeak and getting on with it, our population, we don't really care about their welfare. So we can turn off their internet and they'll stay, shut about it. They won't go on about it too much. Then, well, we can do that and perhaps use that as a way of practicing various kinds of scenarios that might come up in the future. The official explanation is that Moscow is protecting itself from Ukrainian drones, but even pro-Kremlin propagandists are speculating that this has more to do with the war in Iran than the one in Ukraine. So when we first analyzed that, my recommendation was to say two things very clearly. One is that I'm not qualified to make the military or technical analysis of what relation that might have to Ukrainian drones, but that I believe that there's ample room here for a security and surveillance motivation. One rumor via the right-wing Tsargrad network, we're not going to click on that, posits that the new Ayatollah, Mojtaba Khamenei, is in Moscow for medical treatment. I have no evidence for that, and so we're just going to say that's a rumor. Regardless, it's clear that Putin, who has taken extreme measures to protect himself from everything from COVID infection to political assassination, and Putin's extraordinary measures to protect himself from the pandemic in the first few years are a bit comical in the sense that I am ready to bet a lot of money that he actually wasn't even aware of long COVID. That may have been the main threat to him. So he wasn't even well informed about this threat that he put right at the center of his life and that controlled his behavior and the behavior of anybody visiting him. He's very concerned about his personal safety. The public and quite humiliating 2011 death of Gaddafi, another ally, made a huge impression on Putin. So a lot of people make a big deal out of this. Others ask, where is the evidence? For instance, Mark Galeotti is a little bit lukewarm on this idea that Putin was so freaked out by Gaddafi's demise. Now, I myself, not because I have evidence, but I myself am on the alarmist side here. In other words, I do think that's the sort of thing that really gets Putin worked up. Putin is said to have repeatedly watched the footage of his final hours. In many ways, that event marked the beginning of his hard-right revanchist turn. Now Putin's already sky-high paranoia appears to be kicking into still higher gear. And here's a video of Putin from a couple of months back that is interesting. He's going on about immortality here. Let me again try to instant translate, see if that works. After this event, I had a separate meeting with a famous publicist and writer, Mr. Prokhanov, Alexander Andreevich Prokhanov. Prokhanov is equally comical, but perhaps more poetic and more mellifluous version of Dugin. He's a sort of fantasist about how Russia self-realizes via sending tanks all over the place. He's a thinking person, a person with a philosophical mindset. And by the way, Putin doesn't respect Prokhanov or Dugin. He thinks they're clowns. He said something that I want to share with you. He said, do you know what is the most important idea for the present day, for present day Russia? And I said, I'm curious. What is it? It's immortality. And Putin is saying, and maybe this has not only bearing on the present day, but on Russia in general. Look at the aggression in his mouth and lips. The immortality of the Russian people and of Russia. Okay, so I mean, just as an aside, it's amazing how Russians have normalized this aggressive way in which Putin speaks. I mean, if somebody spoke like that, you couldn't take them seriously for a moment. Hello, beautiful community. We could have a very serious... Like, are you like 4? Are you angry you haven't got your candy? But that's how Putin speaks a lot of the time. And it's amazing that people just think that's normal. because what we've heard is quite frankly speculation, the only way we can judge whether it's plausible speculation is if we reflect on Putin's psychology, rather than on evidence that Putin's absence from the Kremlin, however temporary, is somehow connected with this paranoia, and that the internet shutoff is connected with this particular paranoia that Iran has triggered in him. I think that what happens with a very grandiose self, with a lot of sociopathy there and a bit of narcissism, but not the narcissistic personality that Trump has, is that it's inconceivable for a self that grandiose to be dragged, to imagine even the possibility, the theoretical possibility of being dragged into flesh and helplessness and ridicule. And so you experience danger as omnipotent, right? And you lose your capacity to tolerate your dependence on the rest of the world, your capacity to tolerate uncertainty, right? Life is uncertain. I could walk a year ago, now I can't, right? And there's also there the incapacity to recognize how one's own aggression helps create the world one fears. And so psychologically, the direction of this speculation is actually plausible, but what we've got to do analytically is combine it with the important observation that strategically Putin is pleased about what's going on in Iran. Right at the beginning of Trump's preposterous misadventure, I said that it's important to put Putin in two camps. One's the camp where he is personally, psychically triggered by what's been done. And it is psychically triggering to Putin, in my view, when you just take out leaders of states, leaders of authoritarian states. So that's entirely plausible and believable. But also, Trump's misadventure is helping bring about the kind of world that Putin thinks will benefit him. Because the absurd lack of planning of what Trump's done in Iran, the fact that it would have been absurd even with planning, the fact that they have no idea what they're going to do next, that they're lost, that Trump is lost, that's an extraordinary testament to an appalling degradation of state capacity in the United States. And so Putin can rightly think, well, if they can do that, it must be that U.S. Domestic politics, U.S. domestic institutional, bureaucratic, procedural health is in real decay. That sort of thing happened to me too in February 2022, but we're not going to talk about that. We're just going to focus on the Americans. So there is this plausible space for Putin being psychically freaked out about this, but you've got to also understand that that's not going to be the main thing he feels. The main thing he feels is that it's not nice to see this. It's not nice to lose not an ally, or at least an ally in a very weak sense, which is what Iran was to Russia. But still, the global carousel of frenemies and what is left of the post-1999 global order is, further disordered by Trump's action in such a way that Putin thinks will actually benefit him. Now, it's a good question whether the kind of world Putin wants is the kind of world that will benefit him. A might is right, hyper neoliberal world where you get what you want, you buy what you want. If you can't get it, if you can't buy it, you just kill enough people and take it. It's not entirely clear that that's the kind of world in which Putin would necessarily sustainably flourish. But that's another conversation. It's certainly the kind of world he wants and the kind of world he thinks that Trump's misadventure in Iraq helps bring about. That's primary. And secondary might be paranoia and discombobulation and this speculation might well be not out of place in pointing to that being the kind of psychological state Putin might be in, but it is speculation nevertheless. Lots of love, talk soon.